The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Minnesota Soccer Podcast. It's Monday night. I drove 7.5 hours today. I'm tired. I'm David Naylor. Nic Hallett, Tom Schreier are in the house.
David Naylor, where did you drive from?
I drove from Kansas City, where I watched a soccer game yesterday, courtesy of our loving and caring sponsorship Zone Coverage. So, Minnesota United played a game against Kansas City.
Did not play well.
Did they play?
Some of them tried a little bit. There were attempts made.
You were in KC. Were they there?
They were there.
Okay.
That's why we sent him, actually.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
I saw the game. I was in the press box. It's a very nice stadium. I enjoyed the experience of being there, and the game was informative. I would say at the very least it was. I don't want to say it's what I expected, but it's a little bit what I expected. Nick, where were you at going into this game? Just in case nobody's listening to this back-to-back with last week's pod.
Yeah, I was at very low expectations because, what ended up happening, United playing KC at home and then playing them away, when that happened last year, almost identical situations. United plays very well against KC here at TCF Bank Stadium and then gets shellacked against KC last year. So that was actually just my expectation, is that history would repeat itself. I would have had like a slight little bit of bullishness, because it's like, all right, well, if that's what happened last year, why can't Heath maybe learn from that? And he was able to get a draw in this situation, and KC was arguably better than they were last year. So if he's able to get a draw from him this year, can he maybe build on that and do something about it in KC? And actually, that's one of the frustrations for me, I feel like, and I'd be interested to hear what he said after the game when you were there. But for me, I gave him a low marks for the manager rating, because it's like, you knew exactly what you were going into.
Yeah.
Not only have you done this before, but you've done it before with this team, and you just played them. So you know what you're up against. And basically, I think he said it himself after the last game, was that KC is, sorry if I'm going long-winded on this, but KC is, their press is intense always, even more so at home. I think those were his words, and it's like he didn't heed his own advice and adjust to that. And so that part is, on one hand, really quality team on every level. So what can you do about it? But on the other hand, dude, make an adjustment. Make a big adjustment.
So let's start with Heath then. I think that's a pretty good place to start. Do you think he should have started in the 4-3-3 that they changed to at the start of the second half?
Yes, because it would have been different than what they did. But I don't know that would be like my go-to change necessarily. But that would have been fine, because that's the other formation that they've used the most thus far.
And it tends to have been the more defensive of their formations, in that it puts another person in the defensive midfield and fills some spaces. And specifically, what Heath said, talking about the change after the game, because he was asked, he doesn't usually make halftime changes, and that one was necessary.
Yes.
Was that putting a third body in central midfield allowed Ibsen and Schuler to be able to go out wider and to fill up some of those spaces that Sporting Kansas City, and in particular Graham Zusi, abused to such great effect in the first half. And for the 20 minutes in the second half that United played with 11 men, it worked. United in the second half, while Maximiano was on the pitch, gave up one shot, and it was off target, as opposed to in the first half where they gave up 18.
It's a great stat. That's
and they
good
had
information.
Pretty decent opportunities going forward with the formation, so it's not like it killed their attack either. So you can question the selection from the beginning of the game. You can question Alexi Gomez's play, which has drawn a lot of criticism in the past 2 weeks, and justifiably so. You rated him low. He was the target of a lot of the criticism. He was almost directly at fault for at least one of the goals based on his coverage. And so him getting pulled at halftime was not only for the change of formation, but also wasn't his game.
Yeah. No, certainly not. Alexi Gomez is a polarizing figure because he can be so all over the place. But one of those reasons, and one of the things he doesn't have a ton of is defensive capability. That's for sure. I mean, I like the formation, discussion. Like maybe that's something they should have done. But I also just thought why build out of the back against this press, and why not try to do something different in that regard? And they just. It just should have been. I just felt like he should have done something dramatic because this felt so inevitable. And it's like, at least if he'd have done something dramatic, puts Abu and Mason Toye up top, just to give them 2 targets that are
run onto the ball.
Yeah.
So you're already sending Christian Ramirez to run onto, because that was a plan that they tried a lot. Ramirez got caught offside 3 times and had 2 more opportunities where he was real close to getting in on goal because they were looking for the pass. And Ramirez, I told you on Twitter, I was impressed with how involved he was in the game plan and just couldn't quite get the quality to get a good shot on goal.
He looked very good in the beginning. It was hard to tell if he kind of became fatigued, or if KC started to find the best way to take him out of the game, or if it was because KC was doing so well at possessing throughout, and that just erased him as well. So it's hard to tell overall, but yeah, I thought he was in the beginning was great, but I don't understand why Heath didn't do something more grandiose and really just try to throw a wrench at them, and he didn't, and they beat you exactly how they expect you. I mean, it's easy to say that from my position, but it's, sometimes when you're sitting in the, it's like playing the Golden State Warriors. I'll get our first cross-sport reference in quickly. You could game plan and throw any wrench at them, and most of the time it's not going to freaking matter.
And I'm not sure United have a big enough wrench to actually screw with KC. That's part of the problem with them, and it leads into the Warriors analysis. KC moved back into first in the West with this result. They've never been out of the top 3 the entire season. They are a decidedly better team than Minnesota United playing at home. And my first thought when United's starting lineup came out, and I get to the stadium and I'm like, United are starting their best 11. That's all I can expect. You have the one change as Kallman in for Calvo, which we knew about all week, which is not a surprise. Nothing else changes from the previous game, and I'm like, okay, that's United's best 11. That's the best they're going to put out there. I think that they have the best chance to score goals and win the game with the lineup they put out there.
Yeah.
And then it got turned inside out in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, and credit to, if you think about it from that first 30 minutes, it really is kind of a bad mistake by... I really link Ibarra as a part of that mistake, but then Mears' pass that was intercepted leads to that first goal, and you could just blame that on those 2, but it was the press that initiated it. And after that, they equalized. Obviously, Mears hits a stunning strike. And they looked good at times. It's right around the time Ramirez hit the crossbar.
It was a minute after.
Yeah, so
the response to the first goal was awesome.
Yes, and to your point that the best 11 was doing their job and playing tit for tat with them, but it just became so evident that wasn't going to work thereafter when KC really started turning the screws, and I'm really surprised Heath didn't have a quicker plan B, but I guess you could argue he did do it kind of as quick as he could in terms of doing it at halftime.
Yeah, like I would have been surprised to see him make a change before halftime. Like I was a little bit surprised to see him make a change at halftime, but it was necessary, and to the extent he said this. I wrote his comments down in the post game. While Maximiano was on the field, it worked, but then Maximiano wasn't on the field anymore. So let's talk about Maximiano quick. Maximiano has
Should we talk about him as long as he was on the field? Because that'll be quick.
We could time it out and spend 20 minutes. Spend 18 minutes. Sorry, he went off in the 63rd.
I got you guys.
And we're not going to do that because there's not that much to cover. Basically,
it's just Tom yelling for 18 minutes. What are you doing?
Oh, God, no.
Formationally, it makes sense, but he comes on at halftime, gets a yellow within 3 minutes because he's late on a challenge, and I'm like, this has happened every time. Gets a second yellow in 63. The dude has received 4 yellow cards in 106 minutes on the field. That is not sustainable. And, like...
As evidence this week.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's like he finally got 2 in a game, and he's a prime candidate to get sent off if he's going to be... Like, if they ever start him, that's just asking to go down to 10. Like, at this point, whether it seems with him to still be fitness just because he's late on stuff. Like both of the 2 tackles this game were because he either lost the ball or was late on a pass and late on a tackle and just didn't seem to have the fitness to catch up to the speed of play.
Well, and just like fitness is one way to describe it, but just like his timing is off because he's been out of football for, prior to this, 9 months with an ACL tear. So timing is understandably going to be off. On one level, it's understandable, but on the other, it's just like it's just I don't care what circumstances are, you can't do this. It's unacceptable. You can't get 2 yellows as a sub within 20 minutes and put your team in that position. Because actually, was it 3-1 at that point?
It was 3-1 for the entire time.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was that game still felt like it was pretty much out of reach, but man, talk about...
It still felt like it was out of reach, but the change in formation had reduced the ease at which Kansas City was getting into the box at the very least. Like, it wasn't like...
And United has shown in the past that they can come back. And so I would say it's long shot.
It would have been long odds, but
he completely ruined it. Like, there was long odds, but maybe they could have done it, but when he did that, it was ruined.
And it's one of those things where it's like you get a second goal, and all you've got to be is within a shot going into the end of the game. And when you're holding Kansas City to not really getting good offensive opportunities, Graham Zusi's not sitting 6 yards from the sideline in your box for the entire 20 minutes of the first half. If you're 1 goal down, you can get a breakaway and get a point out of that game.
Yeah.
I don't think it was out of the question, but the red card just destroys it.
Corner kick, and then you bang it in, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got the bodies to do that. So
the other thing again where I kind of want to, it's hard not to blame Heath a little bit is you point out the stats of how often he's getting yellows, and every time I've had to, as I player rate every game, every time I've had to rate this dude, he's been atrocious. So it's the one redeeming factor is the point, as you point out, that maybe the team shape was better with him on the field, but he's been so bad every time he's been on the field. So bad.
So you make the option is then Colin Martin instead.
Yeah. Who actually, every time he's cameoed, has played pretty well this season. The one game he started, he was poor, but every time he's cameoed, he's been good.
So then that puts a question of, because essentially, it would have been the same change positionally. It would have been the same swap for swap to move Colin Martin into the center of the defensive midfield, change the shape to 4-3-3, which they've done with him before. Is that a question of, does Heath not trust Martin to play a full 45 minutes and keep up with the pressure? Or because it seemed like the recipe for Maximiano doesn't seem to make sense, that he'd be chosen in that situation over Martin to me, but I'm also not Adrian Heath.
It makes sense if Maximiano is what we all expect him to be, and that's a dude who came from Brazil's top division, a huge body, and a good defensive mid. But I don't know that he is any of those things because we've never seen it.
Because we've never seen it. And his last professional play was in the Ukrainian second division, I think.
Tom played in the Ukrainian third division last week.
It was fun, though. I was with the Ball family.
That's Lithuania, Tom.
How many times on this podcast do we have to tell you that it's Lithuania?
Come on, man. Get straight.
Oh, man.
I just
I actually I wanted to go on a LeVar Ball tangent. I had something, but let's keep going.
No, let's not give Mr. Ball any more screen time than he already gets.
Well, okay, let me ask you real quick. How come?
I don't want to do this.
How much attention that guy can generate? How come no one hired him to be like a promoter for them. Someone should have done that.
WWE.
Yeah, someone.
Did you see the Lonzo Ball commercial?
Yeah.
With for Equalizer? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, that's what made me think of it. Actually.
Yeah.
No, I avoid as much of this content as possible.
Dude, the Equalizer commercials are funny.
It's so because one of them's like a ton of NBA players trying to do a Denzel impression, right?
I don't know if I've seen that one.
Oh, really? That one's,
sense.
and then the one with Lonzo is him just merchandising Equalizer. And he's like, I'm good at this, like, no, stop.
Yeah, and he just keeps making like bad business moves, and he's making fun of his dad.
Are you guys in the middle of a point? I'm trying to remember because I have a casual man observation. Whenever you're ready.
We're talking about how Maximiano played.
Yeah, finish that.
You
and then casual man.
I was done with the Maximiano point. Casual man, go.
So notice a couple of things. Kansas City scored 9 minutes in, something like that. They scored pretty early, right?
9 minutes in. Yep.
Yeah. So first thought. Another bad start.
Yep.
I thought it was kind of over at that point. And again, this is kind of me switching between the finals and this game and just knowing what you guys have
because
said on the
of
podcast.
course this game was during the game 2 of the NBA Finals.
Right. What was the reaction in Kansas City when Minnesota scored? Because I was like, oh, hey, it might be a better game than I thought.
Silence.
As in the crowd's nervous.
They didn't know what to expect, because they had been running the show the first 10 minutes. Get the goal. Immediately, first attack from Minnesota United, Christian Ramirez hits the crossbar.
Yeah.
Next, off of that possession, Mears hits it in from 30. That stadium went from rocking to silence.
Kansas City's goal was sweet. Right?
Oh, yeah. Charlotte's goal was awesome. That was a great strike.
So break down those first 12 minutes, or I guess the 9 minute and 12 minute, because it seemed like this was United screwing up again early on. In the back of your mind, were you like, could Minnesota go 1-1 and just play defense and try to draw? What was your reaction to those two?
That's what I've that's kind of what I've been saying a little bit the whole time. Is this is a fixture that 9 times out of 10 you're probably going to lose. So why not play for just the draw, even from the beginning, kind of potentially? And honestly, it's hard to completely lump KC's opening goal into the same old story of United allowing early goals, because it was less. It wasn't really. Usually, it's the defense that's at issue, but in this case, it wasn't. It was a turnover.
Yeah.
An attempt to be moving the ball up the field, and they lost it. And it was just a lightning quick move by KC. They just make one pass, and it's one strike, and it's done. It's not on the defense at that point.
Right.
So I wouldn't lump it. It still does feel like Minnesota United down early, but it wasn't on the defense like it usually is. And again, at times when they go forward, they look powerful and they look effective. It's just my new feeling about this team is, and I think I said this on a recent podcast. I feel like I've said it to you, David. I feel like the next designated player is clearly going to be a center mid and needs to be, because when we talked about this, when Ibson was out with his most recent injury and he missed a game, his presence was so obvious that he was missed.
It was the first matchup of this. That was the game, because it was him in possession was what they were sorely lacking in the first matchup.
Yes, and I think in this game, Ibson's possession helped at times, but what was killed was Schuller wasn't able to as much assist in that regard, and Ibson couldn't provide any defensive capabilities that was needed from his position. And so I think what you're able to get when you use a DP slot is you're able to get a midfielder that you see a million times over in the Premier League. Every Prem team has a guy who can do his defensive responsibility, but can also keep possession and move the ball forward. Your Ander Herrera's, your Granit Xhaka's, every Jordan Henderson, every
Dyer.
Prem team, don't put Dyer can't forward pass that well. Musa Dembele.
There you go.
Musa Dembele. Every team has those guys, and United does not. But a designated player slot would definitely be able to fill that type of role. So to me, that it's becoming just glaring that that's what they need.
You'd rather have that than a better center back?
You have 2 spots.
Yeah, I would, because we'll really know without hopefully we'll still see a few more games of Coleman and Boxall. Mm-hmm. After I see that, I would have a really better take, and that might be what Manny Lagos is saying to himself. Yep. Let me see this partnership a bit more, and then I'll know further what I want to do with the DP slot. But yeah, I think like we've talked about, I think defending is such a team thing. I think center backs aren't as hard to come by. I think you get a really nice center mid. Look how freaking good the best player on Sporting KC was their defensive mid. I forget his name, number 6. And I was like,
Ilya.
Yeah, Ilya. And I'm watching this guy. I watched him last week here when we were at TCF. I'm watching him last night on TV, and I'm like, every time he touched the ball, I'm like, this guy's filthy. He's so good. Like, and I'm about to do my stereotypical Google search to find this guy's history out. And then the announcer goes, Ilya used to be, came up through the youth academy at Barcelona. I'm like, Jeebus Cripes, of course. No wonder he's sick. And that is the type of quality that, they beasted United with, and why I'm saying that's what they need to find.
And you're saying there's availability there. There should be multiple options.
From a DP slot? Yes.
Yeah.
But while we're talking about people's youth team experience,
this could go anywhere.
No, a thing that was highlighted, I've been told in the TV commentary.
Yeah, did you watch the FS1 broadcast?
Yeah.
And I know was noted pretty heavily in the people I was sitting with in the press box was 2 of Sporting Kansas City's 3 substitutes are homegrown players from their own academy. Juan Cousin, who scored the second goal, playing in his second MLS game. Jalen Lindsay.
He got a little lucky. He did. But it was nice. It was nice.
Jalen Lindsay playing in his first MLS game ever.
Yep.
And they have a third, Gianluca Busio, 16-year-old kid, on the substitute roster for this game. Could have come into the game instead of Diego Rubio if they'd felt like it.
Yeah.
They could have had all of their substitutes be homegrown teenager players.
Crazy.
It's one of the things that we. When the first matchup of these two teams came around, Nick, I know, wrote a piece about Sporting Kansas City hopefully being a model for Minnesota United moving forward. That's the kind of thing that SKC, having been in the league for a number of years now, they've had the chance to build up their academy. They've had a chance to sign up homegrown players and to build them through their system from a way lower ground level than just the draft picks, which has been great for Minnesota United. But this is a whole different ballgame when you're talking about players that are coming in on homegrown deals that you've built and nurtured up to come in and have that be a functional, good part of your team in an MLS game. That's something Minnesota is nowhere close to yet.
And perfect example of why that is talk about your allegory of why people should be calm about this result and Minnesota United as a whole. Perfect. That's such a good example. This Sporting KC is the best team in the Western Conference. On their bench are 3 teenagers that they've developed from their youth academy. Where does Minnesota United's been in the league only a year and a half, and where's their youth academy? It's still completely under construction. They don't even have they have 1 or 2 full teams even. A full academy has a U19, a U18, a U17, a U16, U15, all the way down. And Minnesota United right now has a U14 and a U13 team.
And that's in Blaine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that you're right. You just compare those two things, and it's how do you compete? These guys are getting players from a farm system. United doesn't even have one yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So talk about being way behind. And I think you talked about it so much. I really loved your coverage in your tweets because you talked about what a great situation Sporting KC has down there. The fan following. I think you retweeted someone who pointed out how Sporting KC breaks all these molds that MLS expected. They're outside the top 20 markets in the U.S. They still sell out every game. Their stadium's located in the suburbs, which you're not supposed to do. Still sell out every game.
So let's explain this. The Kansas City Royals are also in the suburbs, but they're about 15 minutes west.
East.
Okay,
because they're on the Missouri. The Royals and the Chiefs both.
Yeah, and they share a parking lot on the east side. The stadium's about 15 minutes
to the
west. What did you think? Which is funny, just given that Kansas City's, you went in the city, it's actually a cool city. You'd think they'd want to kind of have their stadiums in there to showcase it. But both, I think, Arrowhead and those are older stadiums. But what did you think of the location?
So
it's also funny because it's so different from Minneapolis, right? All the stadiums are.
Yeah, which I think is good. It showcases, right? You get the aerial view every time.
Yeah,
same with St. Paul. I mean, the Wild are right there.
Yeah, living here my whole life, that's just you guys talking about this concept makes it what? They're not all downtown?
I suppose the United Stadium kind of is
Kind of
a
is.
little bit of both, right? It's like outside of
But it's
City, but in between.
town.
In between, yeah.
Like it's the argument about the one that's come up. Here's your baseball cross-sport reference. The argument over the Braves' new stadium, which is
in
out,
which they did not vote on and paid for. Yes,
yeah, but it's like
in Cobb
out
County.
out of the city and away. Not great for public transit.
where the other one was on the line. It was an old Olympic stadium.
Yeah, like so that it's so
the Kansas City Park.
Children's Mercy Park is on the Kansas side of Kansas City.
For people who don't know, there is a Kansas City, Missouri.
There's
and
Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas.
Should we break it down?
Yeah,
In great detail.
there's if you want to see a John Oliver bit on it.
Oh my god.
It's actually amazing.
Seriously?
It
That
costs
sounds good.
Costs them a lot of money because people play. I'm dead serious. Play the Missouri and the Kansas side off each other. Companies do,
Oh,
and they just
totally.
go back and forth. And they burnt through all this money because they're subsidizing each. Kansas and Missouri are subsidizing the companies.
Well, and
sorry, this is such a weird
What?
tangent, but yes, it's a great John Oliver deal.
Any big city like that splits two states.
Which Cincinnati does. Cincinnati South Suburbs.
Cincinnati does. St. Louis does.
Yeah.
There's a group of 4 cities in Iowa and Illinois that split the
This-
Quad cities.
Davenport.
This
It's
geography
not-
lesson right now.
Yeah.
It's not an uncommon thing, but what it means is the state governments want to play for their half to be better than the other one.
Yeah.
So, like the Missouri half, back to this previous point, the Missouri half has the Royals and the Chiefs. The Kansas half has Sporting and has the Speedway, which those two are in a complex together. Again, also like really right on the interstate, really easy to get to, but it's a different vibe than just about any stadium I've been to before in terms of the surroundings to it, just because it's the Speedway and the park are a pretty huge part of the like environment because that's how that works. But the biggest thing next to them is a giant Cabela's
Interesting.
and like a set of outlet malls.
Which is not uncommon. The Florida Panthers are right by a outlet mall in the suburbs. The Cobb County thing has an outlet mall over there. The big Jerry World, right, is in Arlington between Fort Worth and Dallas. So it's not uncommon. Did you get the impression if you lived in Kansas City, it'd be because you drove out there, you kind of had some concept of this, would be easy to get to, and that was part of it?
Very easy.
Yeah.
Like if you're
It's a destination. I
which
think that's the
is a
point.
thing that most people have cars. Like it's one of those things about United's new stadium that I like is that it's so easily
Foot
accessible.
traffic, light rail, and
It's a-
94. Yeah.
Mhm. And like I
Snelling.
know SKC has a bus, like a very nice bus station set up there, so they've got
Yeah.
public transit access, but it's just not at the same level. An in-city stadium like a Lions is going to be, like US Bank Stadium is now, like the Philadelphia stadiums, which are all in one big group.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is the other side of the river.
Are really, really easy to get to.
So an example of what doesn't work is Chicago, right? Because Chicago's stadium is out in the suburbs, and that team, I don't think draws, right? Do you
The
guys know?
Fire.
They do kind of struggle.
Yeah.
Could check the numbers, but I think that's right.
Because the Cubs, if you remember back in the day, before they put on the lights, it was a big deal. They were like going to go to Schaumburg. And if you've ever been to Chicago, Schaumburg is like 45 minutes from downtown Chicago. Big old suburb. But I think this is an interesting conversation that it works. And it is probably means the team is very relevant, that people are willing, even if you live on the Missouri side, to go to the Kansas side.
So
and stuff like
so
that.
here's the thing that like I tweeted about last night how like they had over 20,000 people at the game. So not a sellout, but pretty packed capacity crowd. They have very well coordinated fans. Their supporters groups are very well known for making a good environment and loud stadium. Well designed for soccer. Good
it
for
seemed
that.
like a good atmosphere.
The thing that I found interesting today, so I spent some time driving around Kansas City and doing some stuff just while I was down there to check it out because I hadn't really spent much time there, is how embedded Sporting is in downtown Kansas City. Like, the club isn't there, but they have a club-sponsored bar in Kansas City's like primary nightlife district, the Kansas City Power and Light District. It's called, you'll like this, Nick, No Other Pub.
Nice.
And it's like I put some pictures on Twitter of it because I was so interested in like just how embedded it was. It is a enormous fixture in this
That's cool.
thing. Just like it's a huge profile, club crest, club iconography
Is it like
everywhere.
You're saying it's like a joint business venture?
Yeah. Like
Like-
I think it's owned by the club.
That's
like,
pretty rad. That's interesting.
So while the stadium is out, like 15 minutes out of town, very in the suburbs, the club and its identity is well embedded within the city of Kansas City. So rather than thinking of it just like as a suburban crowd, your gentrified, relatively well-off suburban families who are there because they can be, because it looks good to your people. You've got the diehards too. Like they are. It seems to me as an outsider that they have both invested in their community and have received the buy-in back from that community because of what they've done.
And what about the United fans? Did they have a presence there?
Yes.
And what was the interaction between United and Kansas City?
So United, the Dark Clouds and True North brought a bus down, and I know there were more people than just rode on the bus. They filled. They had like a corner section of the stadium that was reserved for away fans, and they filled it completely up, and they were basically directly across the
Press box.
short width of the field
okay.
from where I was sitting in the press box, and you could hear them sometimes.
It's for sure the goal.
Well, you could hear them at the goal, but if you catch the Kansas City fans in like a downswing between chants, I start hearing stuff I recognize.
Just for people here, it would be like an hour-long flight, right?
Yeah,
think,
probably
right?
7-hour drive.
And how was that drive? Because you did that for us.
If you did it in a bus, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like it's the unfortunate thing about the MLS as it's currently constructed, which I actually talked to. I talked to a couple of the Kansas City media about, and I've talked to a couple people from the supporters groups about. I traveled a lot when I was covering the Timberwolves, as people who have followed me for a bit know. And it helped that I was based in St. Louis because that gave me some more avenues to go to and closer cities to go to with Memphis and New Orleans. And you got Chicago, Indiana, OKC. Like, there are options for that. For a team in the Midwest in MLS, you have Minnesota, Chicago, Kansas City. That's it.
Colorado?
Like, and then it's like Colorado and Dallas.
Yeah.
And then you're at Columbus, Toronto, Cincinnati next year, Nashville next year, and coasts.
Yeah.
There's not much for, like, a large part of, like, soccer culture in England is your fans go on away days. And they go to away games, every one. Because they can. Because the longest drive in England is like 11-hour drive. Possible from the North Coast to the South Coast.
Yeah.
And people do it. Like, whereas the Kansas City trip this year it's about the only one that United are going to do because I don't think they play in Chicago this year. Like...
Yeah, they played Chicago here.
Yeah, they played Chicago here, and I don't think they go to Chicago. I think they have another game at Kansas City in like late in July, I think.
Yeah.
But those are your opportunities, and if not that, you're going to have like when you can get a bus for people, and you've got like enough people to fill a charter bus who chip in however much money it would have cost to do it, you can get down there for a pretty reasonable price, take the weekend to do it, and be good to go. If you're talking about, like, flying to Seattle, flying to New England, flying to Orlando City, like, it takes out the number of people that can go. And so that's part of what makes these Kansas City trips special for United, both for the players, for the fans, and just the entire experience, is, like, the players... multiple players publicly acknowledged how awesome the supporters group was and how audible and clear they were from the pitch after the game. Michael Boxall told media after the game, part of what he was devastated after the game, just because he was so disappointed at the performance they'd put on for the fans that had traveled that way to get them. And it's like you can use the word rivalry a little bit with this, even if it's been pretty one-sided for the last 2 years. But it's more of a relationship.
Which would be Royals
clubs.
Twins would be the closest.
Yeah,
probably.
like it's the two clubs are kind of building a relationship with each other, because obviously, like, Kansas City brought fans up for the away day 2 weeks ago too. Like, it's an interesting picture, and it makes you wish there were more opportunities like this in the Midwest, but partially just because of how the cities in the United States are set up. There aren't that many options for a Minnesota team's local geographic rival to come into the MLS even in the future.
The Wolves issue.
Yeah, it's the exact same issue as the Wolves. So that was a long tangent about Kansas City.
I think it's interesting.
I think it's interesting to talk about
the
too.
environment, especially because people could get out there. I think that's what we're getting at.
Yeah, and it was like, and they were out there, they were involved, they were loud. I commented on Twitter multiple times last night because I was so impressed with volume, capacity, the work they were doing on their own. Ran into the supporters group bus at Joe's Barbecue in Kansas City today, so they were out enjoying the delights of the town the same way I was.
And SKC has some of the best jerseys in the league. Their unis are always, since they rebranded, they've been tip top.
Speaking of rebranding, I was impressed with how many old Rainbow KC Wizards jerseys I saw.
Nice.
Going to the game last night.
That's
a lot
funny.
of people had their throwbacks ready. Like,
that's funny.
it's one of those you do that at any sporting event you go to, right? You go jersey watching and you see who you see. A lot of old KC Wizards jerseys.
That's awesome.
I was impressed because it's like you've been here for a while if you're rocking a KC Wizards jersey.
Yeah,
But
that's dope.
So back on the game. We talked a lot about the atmosphere, and I think that's fair since I got to go be in it. Also, I'll do last thing in the atmosphere. A thing that could have been a good thing or a bad thing, but was awesome last night. My seat in the press box was outside. So they have a row of the press box that's within the glass
Really?
and a row in front of it, which... Like,
Just in case they're snipers, like you're the first one to go.
well, but it's like last night it was like 78 degrees, perfect.
Yeah.
I get like
But
the full.
Kansas get
It
warm.
could get roasting. Like it could have been miserable.
Yeah.
But it was one of those like on a night like tonight. This is awesome. I've got the outlets. I've got the good stuff, and my little media privilege moment. TCF Bank Stadium has much better food
Interesting.
than
Oh,
they did.
really?
They had some chicken tenders that were not very good.
Oh, interesting.
I was disappointed by the media
Kansas
food.
City should have good food. Come on, Kansas City.
But
that is weird.
But a point in the Children's Mercy Park press box's favor is they don't lock their frickin' soda fridge after full time.
So you can get in there.
So I can get in and have a Diet Coke while I'm writing my recap. I'm looking at you. TCF locks that fridge.
Does it?
Yes, they do.
I feel
Every
like
week. I've checked every week.
That's because Nick goes in and gets like 10 Cokes and leaves.
I'm out. Let me get a 12-pack and then I'm out of here.
I finished.
You're putting beer in there.
We should get beer in this cooler.
I finished drinking the second of the 2 Diet Cokes I took while I was drinking my recap in about somewhere in southern Iowa today. So
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
I don't think the TCF Bank staff would be upset if you just grabbed 4 Cokes right in the beginning.
We should try it next week. Just go in there and just double fist grab like 8 of them. If they didn't run out of Diet Coke every week, I would do that.
Please don't.
Yeah, I'll go right there. We're in my zone coverage, beautiful branded gear. Like, yes, this is who I am and what I represent.
Just be like, no, just do it, and then be like, I work for ESPN 1500.
I'm Andy Greener.
I'm with K-Fan.
Oh, God.
I am Sid Hartman. Which is actually something Sid Hartman might do.
Yeah.
Like, just yell, I'm Sid Hartman, and do something.
And then grab 10 Cokes.
And grab 10 Cokes. Like, you'd be like, okay, Sid, fine. That's actually the chillest thing you've done this week, so we're fine with it.
So, quick notes on the actual game last night, now that we've explored that to its fullest potential. How did you feel about Coleman playing 90 minutes?
I thought he actually, and I wrote this on the website, but I thought he played really well in every situation where the ball interacted with him or any time he was called on. He was there, and he made a lot of good clearances. You can always point to the center backs a little bit anytime a goal is scored because it kind of has to, at some point, effectively go through them, but I don't think he can be judged on this performance at all either, though, because the people around him, i.e. that right side of SKC's attack, the left side of Minnesota United's formation, was cut open so easily that everyone was left out.
Well, and that was the problem I was thinking, right, is we talked about the first half and talked about the problems of KC has the ball cut inside, Zusi cuts out, goes out, no one covers him. And like Heath was very aware of that's the problem. And it just didn't get fixed. And that's
in the first half.
Yeah. And to a certain degree, when Zusi is coming into the penalty box with Eric Miller and Alexi Gomez just nowhere near him to pick whatever pass he wants, what are your center backs supposed to do?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Like, they did the best they possibly could with the scenarios that they were given. And honestly, like, Kansas City could have scored a lot more goals than they did, if not for both Coleman and Boxall's interventions.
Yeah, and
so I think they got dealt a crap hand by the way the rest of the team played last night, and they did the best they could with it.
I couldn't agree more. And if you look at the player ratings in a game that United loses and allows 4 goals, I rated the center backs as the 2 best players.
Yep.
So, so I think that speaks to everything.
Boxall and Coleman were the two players that we talked to last night after the game, and both were really frustrated with how things had gone, and also really complimentary of each other because they're both very nice men. It was like they were both asked about their partnerships with each other and said similar, like, "Oh, he's really easy to play with because he's so freaking good. He just gets in front of everything."
Also, in fairness, they're
going to do that. They're going to do that no matter what. And
they would have been prepped that Calvo's missing for the first time all season.
Yeah.
You guys are going to be asked about each other because you're playing with each other for the first time.
Yeah, when Coleman's playing 90 minutes for the first time this season. Second time.
So I think it'll be really interesting to see how they do against FC Cincinnati because we talked a little bit earlier about we talked off air.
We talked off air about
who would play for FC Cincinnati. You alluded that given that there's a 17-day break after that game, they'll likely go full strength, which is an astute point. I would say if anyone's for sure going to play, it would be the center backs. But like we've just said, likely to be kind of full strength anyway. But if any of the starters were for sure going to play in this game, it would be the center backs. So it'll be really interesting to see how Coleman and Boxall do in that game and any games going forward where Calvo is not available.
I think you're probably right, and they'll keep Omsberg up for cover. Because Wyatt Omsberg was called back from Tulsa again for this game because they had to have a center back for cover.
Yeah, well,
in case of whatever.
Yeah, was Bertrand on the bench?
Not on the bench.
So he hasn't even been featuring on the bench. So Heath clearly does not rate him very highly. So then that makes Wyatt the backup center back at this point.
The 3 bench players who didn't play last night were Manley, Omsberg, and Martin. So all 3 of whom could be in consideration for selection if Heath wants to tune it back a little bit, give Mears a day off, or try out the 4-3-3 and bring Martin in.
Yeah,
in that place and give.
I don't
Martin
think he'll do 4-3-3 in this situation because it's ideally, or in theory, a lesser opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you'll get the normal 4-5-1. But
the other question is, do you see Dunlady start this game?
That's possible
because I think he could be due for a run out for 90 minutes to see how fit he is.
Well, yeah. I mean, but you got to feel like if you're Heath a little bit, like starting him is playing with fire a little bit. Like, why not just take what you can get that second half from it? But I mean, at some point, this kid's got to be. He's either maybe a starter. You got to find out if he can be a starter. And at times he showed he was last year. My contention still is that he maybe should play on the wing in the place of Gomez.
Yeah. I think that'd be an interesting look.
Maybe he
tried out.
Yeah, so maybe he starts, and it's not, by sacrificing Ramirez. It's by sacrificing Gomez. So.
Yep. So there are a couple of interesting possibilities for that. Yes, not that much else interesting to talk about with the players. I thought Darwin had a rough night.
I think it's becoming more and more apparent, and it's so hard to tell how much of it is like everyone now knows, okay, this guy's legit and he's their best player, so we got to make sure we focus on him and take him out, versus is he playing poorly all of a sudden? That's what's hard to discern.
It seems like the decision making has been more forced, is my thought with him. Like the times where we've talked plenty about his skill and the fact that he can go in and beat 3 or 4 guys on the ball because he's got the skill and the capability to do that. But there were a couple times last night where he tried to beat 4 guys with just himself, and it kind of didn't work, instead of trying to cut it back or find somebody else on the cut.
Or there was like 3 or 4 occasions where it's like, oh, nice dribble. Now what are you gonna
and he just gets
who are you gonna pass
over
to? And then you just like, oh, you're going at that guy too. Okay. And then like, oh, you kind of got it on that guy, and then you're still dribbling, and then he loses it. And it's like, that's peculiar.
Because the best opportunities outside of the goal were on Darwin in the open field, which we know is good because he had pace over anybody else in that game. And there were a couple of final balls that were just a hair off when he was doing that, both with just himself and in play with Ramirez. Or it was long passes to Ramirez to the wing to try and open up space away from him. Particularly in the second half after the sending off, there were a couple of moments where Darwin got the ball in the midfield in a relatively good position and just missed his first touch and got run over and lost the ball. Got really visually frustrated, bringing his hands down on his knees, shaking his head, just totally out of it right before he got subbed. So he was not feeling last night's game for one reason or another. I wonder a little bit if he's still dealing with the physicality of the league.
It's a possibility.
And possibly the fact that it's getting pushed more on him now that he's become more of a focal point of the team.
I think people are going to start to scheme and know like this guy is the danger guy that we got to really be focused on. And it can be even like a subtle thing of like not like a tactical change of it can. I think teams are shifting defenders over to him whenever in possession, but it can also be now that he's kind of a known commodity. It can be just that mental shift of like, that guy has the ball, I'm super focused. Whereas like I'm focused when it goes out to Ibarra, but I'm not like laser focused. And it just, as someone who's been a very potent offensive threat himself,
frankly, everyone has that opinion. Come on.
Both on the field and off.
Oh, no.
So,
oh God.
You set him up for that, Tom. That's your fault. I feel unclean.
I have always.
To be fair, you've been in a car for 7 hours. You might be.
You might be kind of.
I deodorized halfway through that trip, you hater. You can't smell me.
Okay. Moving back to me.
Your offensive potency, go on.
All right.
To be truthful, as someone who's played offense and been relatively potent at times offensively, I have always noticed the second time I play a team, if I torched them the first time, they are much better at defending me because they respect me and they're focused on me when I get the ball. And it does. It makes it much harder. And I just feel like that's something Darwin is, again, a guy of his quality, that's kind of can be something he can easily overcome at times. But it's not nothing. And it's something that teams are going to do to him, and it does make it harder. It was so hard not to like do more jokes.
Yeah, I know. I
felt like I had to be serious.
I felt the vibe.
Having 2 other designated players may help that situation, right? Where you
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, as I keep saying, to me, a potent center mid, a stellar center mid with multiple attributes becomes a glaring option as your next DP. That's another reason why.
And as Adrian Heath continues to say basically every time he's talked to after a game.
Did he say it after?
He said it after this game again.
Oh, my goodness.
They're looking to make additions when the next time the transfer window opens to augment the squad.
He did not.
Yes, he did. I have the audio.
That is, wow.
So I didn't
Does
write
he just
that.
hate Manny Lagos? Like, or what is that? Like, what's, I don't know.
Well, that's a typical coach GM dynamic.
But it's also
So it's like just
a
picturing
game-
like Thibodeau, like, man, we got to figure out how we're gonna get new players.
Go back to way earlier where we talked about the lineup set for this game. And what I said was United don't have a big enough wrench to really throw Kansas City off their game. Squad construction is how you fix that. Buying designated players, buying better players, buying players who will come in and start immediately is how you change that. It's how you change the math. And after a game against a team like SKC, it becomes as abundantly clear as it always is that to compete with, not just compete in MLS, but to compete with the best teams in the MLS, the teams who you will see in the playoffs, you have to invest like this. Whether or not, like, whatever the financial situation is, whatever Manny Lagos is thinking, whatever Bill McGuire is thinking, you do not compete with the best teams without that kind of commitment.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair for Adrian Heath to bring that up, especially after a showing like that in a game against a team of that caliber.
But, like, again, though, that's what's interesting is, like, it's like he brings it up so consistently. It's like, okay, dude, like, we hear you. What point are you trying to make now by continuing to bring it up? To me, one of the things that jumps to mind is he's just like, he doesn't want to be judged on his team's performance when he doesn't. To me, it's like a self-preserving thing.
I think it's
like he doesn't want to be judged on, like, he's basically saying, like, don't judge Adrian Heath fully on these performances because I'm not getting enough tools.
I think that's fair. I think the second thing is he wants a positive message for the fan base, right? Kind of a keep the faith. There's
okay.
more coming.
Okay.
I think your point is well taken. The other one is something.
Yeah, that's But again, to do it every time, though?
No, he totally wants more players. That's what he wants.
And I feel like, again, like my point, the joke I made about like the relationship he has with Manny as the sporting director is like, what is that? Doesn't that feel like maybe you're putting pressure, right? You're like just kind of diverting pressure to the front office when you say something like
it's
that?
not unheard. I'm trying to think of a Minnesota example, but it's not unheard of in other markets.
Maybe it's something the front office is like, if you want to deflect to us, like, do it. I don't know. It's peculiar to me.
Okay. We've talked about last week. Wednesday night, the game against Cincinnati is at 6:30. Club has announced that it's going to be streamed on ussoccer.com. So not on TV, and who knows if, I'm assuming there might be some kind of commentary, but it probably won't be great. No offense to whoever the commentators are, but they're not going to be the A-list guys for this one. So, away game at Cincinnati. We'll see what happens. It is their last game for 17 days. This was their last MLS game for 20. Next MLS game is on June 23rd at Colorado. So, with that said...
Sam Nicholson reappearance.
Yep. With that said, speaking of Loons away, I want to transition to a preview for next week that you guys don't know about yet.
Ooh.
Since Minnesota United are off, we got some World Cup to talk about next week on the Minnesota Soccer Podcast.
Heyo.
And Minnesota United players scored 2 goals this weekend.
Yes, they did. One of them.
El Capi Francisco Calvo had himself a very nice header in Costa Rica's 3-0 friendly win over Northern Ireland, as did Minnesota United legend Johan Venegas.
Using the word legend loosely.
Legend.
This is a thing that you'll learn once the team's been around for more than 2 years. We use that for any player who's appeared for any length of time for the Timberwolves, such as Minnesota Timberwolf legend Troy Daniels,
yes,
who played for the team for 10 days.
Good 10 days.
Good 10 days. that in which he didn't get enough minutes. Anyway,
T-Wolves legend Lance Stevenson.
yep,
Yeah.
T-Wolves legend Lance Stevenson.
Lance Prance. Sorry.
Get out of here. So, Costa Rica are a team to watch. Obviously, if you have Minnesota United eyes, because it'll be interesting to see how Calvo does if he plays where he's played. All of the usual Calvo questions.
Did come off. Yeah, nice. Did come off the bench, though, so it doesn't look like he's maybe a starter for them yet at this point. We'll see, I guess. But he's definitely started in other games, so it's kind of interesting.
And the other, not World Cup related, but Calvo related news that I don't think we hit last week, and I don't remember when it came out, is that his former club, Saprissa, are coming to Minnesota to play a friendly match in July against Minnesota United, which adds into a already relatively packed July calendar for Minnesota United at home. But that's... I know I saw some questions about whether or not that was written into Calvo's contract when he signed with Minnesota, is we get to come play a friendly at this. But that'll be an interesting matchup to see, just like you're seeing against the Saprissa, who are a team who've done relatively well in the CONCACAF Champions League in years past and have been a good representative of the Costa Rican League.
Yeah, I don't want to...
We don't know how seriously that will be taken. We don't know who will play because it's a friendly in the middle of a busy July schedule.
Yeah. Do you want me to be honest, or...
I know what it's going to be, but I still think it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I would just say, AFC Bournemouth came when United was in the second division, and Swansea City came when...
Were they both also in the second division at the time?
No, they were in the Prem. They were both in the Prem at the time. Yeah, and Swansea came, and I believe United won. Beat them. So
because it's off season for all these teams.
Yeah, so these games. I mean, and it's been fun because it was super cool.
It's a game that it doesn't matter if they lose.
Swansea City came and played at the National Sports Center, which sounds really cool in its name, but it's a small stadium.
They love Schwans. Okay, they love Schwans.
They really do. And Bournemouth played there, and it's crazy to think. And so, no, it's really cool. Club Leon came from Liga MX. Club Atlas came just last year. So it's been really fun. I like that they do it, but these games are not any sort of real measuring stick.
No, not at all. But it's a cool occasion.
No, they're very fun.
There'll probably be some cool scarves.
Club Atlas, the least heralded team among the ones I just named, when they came last year, their players were so fun to watch because Liga MX, for my money, is a better league than MLS. So it was really fun to watch.
I think it's pretty easy to construct an argument that Liga MX is more fun to watch.
It is, actually.
I think that's a pretty easy argument to construct. Quality is, to some extent, more subjective, but
is it though when you look at the CONCACAF Champions League?
Not
results?
really.
Exactly.
Did you just scoreboard me?
Yes,
Scoreboard.
I guess. Well, you got to say scoreboard in Spanish, though.
Scoreboard!
No, Tom. This is why we can't have nice things.
Why don't you just scream "you're Caucasian" into a microphone?
That was the St. Thomas Academy talking right there. Ooh, we just dunk on Tom
diversity.
Right here.
Diversity is an old wooden ship used during the Civil War era.
Oh boy!
All right, back to soccer.
Yep, back to soccer, and we're about to wrap up because I'm about out of useful content. So we will have some kind of delightful World Cup preview for you next week,
and a breakdown of the FC Cincinnati
and a breakdown
game.
of the FC Cincinnati game, but. United are going to be off for a couple of weeks, so we're going to have some World Cup to watch and talk about.
Just real quick, do you guys have teams kind of that you'll probably be following them anyways, right? Even if the US was in it.
Actually, it's funny that David brings up the World Cup because I just I think we're just hive mind because earlier in the podcast I was thinking about the World Cup and I was like, man, the first year we ever did the Minnesota Soccer Podcast was a World Cup year, and Andy and I broke it down and it was super fun.
Yeah.
And because the U.S. was in it, and now they're not, and it would just be so much more fun if we could break down.
I think that's entirely
the
true.
US.
I just feel like anyone who's I think it's a hard time to add soccer fans because people would just naturally be drawn to the U.S. However, you would still have the problem of the U.S. is not that great at the world stage, right?
Yeah.
I think the flip side of that is anyone who's currently a soccer fan, you're not going to lose them because they probably still have like a quote unquote girlfriend team, right? That's what Ben and Giles call their other.
I have so many girlfriends. Teams.
Stop. But I mean, you guys would already be cheering for another team, right?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
So what are those?
Yeah.
For you
So
guys?
for me, it's England, and it's just I actually do kind of have like an emotional connection. I have a good amount of like English guys that I have that I coach with, that are good friends of mine. But also, I've been watching the Premier League the longest I've watched any soccer on television, and that's mostly comprised of English players. My favorite team is Manchester United, mostly filled with English players. So for all those reasons, I really do watch England closely and will be rooting for them.
And I'm very similar in that 4 to 5 of England's starting 11 play for Tottenham Hotspur in this World Cup, and that's my club team in England, and so I'm interested in their success. I want to see how well they do. Similarly, if you look around like other teams, I want to see how Denmark does. I'd like to see how Costa Rica does.
Denmark's like a sneaky one, isn't it? Or does everyone know that?
Yeah.
They've got a couple okay.
They've got a couple okay.
They're all right.
Belgium is the team that's like
that's
the
right, the hipster team.
Belgium, not even the hipster team. They're supposed to be better than they are at this point.
Okay.
They've got a lot of good players, but they haven't.
They'll be good.
Really,
they'll be good.
We'll see. I'm not sure how much I trust Roberto Martinez.
That's kind of fair.
But it's it's kind of the cool thing because it's Minnesota sports reference. It's like watching the NBA playoffs as a Timberwolves fan for the previous 14 years.
Yeah. I mean, you're rooting for Spurs
because you never had a team, so you just get to watch for fun and pick who you think is fun to watch or whatever like that.
Yeah.
So you have like all of the like South American and African teams that have maybe a couple players that you've heard of, but a lot that you haven't, that are just going to go out and maybe surprise you, maybe do something interesting. You have who knows what the Russian team's going to do, and they're hosting World Cup. You have the English team that has one of their better teams they've had in the 52 years since they won a World Cup, and has potential to live up to. An interesting stat about the England team, since we've talked a little bit about them, they and Russia are the only two teams at the tournament to have 100% of the players in their squad for the World Cup play in their nation's domestic league. It's England and Russia are the only ones.
Huh.
And there are like 3 who have none of their players playing in their own domestic league. I know Sweden is one of them.
Italy might be the same if they were there. Italy would
be very high. Spain is not as high as I thought they would be.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
We can do all this. We can break all this down.
There's a lot we can break down with it next week when we have less United to talk about, more World Cup. So with no United...
Spain's got to be pretty close. Pretty close.
I'll look up the numbers next week. I saw the post earlier. I don't have it up in front of me. But we'll look at that next week. The World Cup kicks off Thursday, June 14th with Russia, Saudi Arabia.
That's the first game?
Yep.
Because
it's interesting, though. It's kind of funny.
The host country plays the first game, so Russia plays the first game. Thursday at 10 a.m. our time. So if you want to blow off work, there's something for you. And then the rest of
I was watching Saudi Arabia.
And then the rest of the first stage of group, like the first match day of games, is played through June 19th with like 3 games a day every day. 1 at 7, 1 at 10, 1 at 1. First
7 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
Man, I've never seen that 7 a.m. game.
It's the same as the early.
When you went to bed.
Well, it's the same as the early Premier League game. The early Premier League game kicks off at 6:45 a.m. here.
Yeah, I never see that game.
I sleep through that game a lot. But if I were to pick one out to look,
DVR is a beautiful thing.
Before we end, if I were to pick one game out of the first match day to look at for you, Germany-Mexico.
Yeah.
On Sunday the 17th.
Yeah. Ooh.
Is a opportunity for Mexico to take a big shot as probably North America's best representative at this World Cup. Heyo.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to break down El Tri on the pod too. That'll be one team for sure.
Absolutely.
I'll be keeping a close eye on, but I imagine we will want to. On the 17th, that's a great day. A very attractive man I know is turning 28 that day, so that's awesome.
Naylor,
Congrats, Tom. And with that, we're going to get out of here before Nick tries to toot his own horn one more time.
Better get out quick.
This has been the Minnesota Soccer Podcast. Please read our stuff on zonecoverage.com. Please like, subscribe, give 5-star ratings, all that jazz. We're giving you lots of good coverage. Today was the MLB draft, and we've got lots of coverage of that. And basically just the Twins because it's the summer and all the other sports except soccer are done.
Great Twins. We have great Twins
Phenomenal
coverage.
Twins coverage.
Yeah.
Brandon Warren is all over it. Tom is all over it. That stuff
Brandon's
is
been
legit.
doing the draft, so you can learn about the players they drafted. And then they're in the middle of an 11-game home.
Like, here's how I know your guys' Twins stuff is good. Baseball is my least favorite sport, and every time I see one of your guys' stories tweeted out, I'm like, yeah, I want to click on that.
Yeah.
You got to click on it though.
Oh, yeah.
You got to give the clicks.
I do. That's the thing. Is like I do not like baseball, and I click sometimes.
You got to give the clicks.
Yeah.
So zonecoverage.com. We'll be back next week talking World Cup and FC Cincinnati. I'm David Naylor at Prophecy Eater, Nic Hallett, Prince Hallett, Tom Schreier, T Schreier 3. We will see you next week. Adios.
Peace.